I think people don't understand what happens when a company goes bankrupt. Let's say you have a trucking firm. To get started, this firm took a bunch of loans from a bank. Then there is a run on the bank because the Federal Reserve had been expanding the money supply. The bank then calls in its loans. The trucking firm cannot pay off the loans and so goes bankrupt and is now owned by the bank. Notice that the buildings, the trucks, the shipping routes didn't all just explode. Everything is still there. The capital is all still there. But facing a bank run, this bank called in a bunch of loans and most couldn't pay and so went bankrupt. Now the bank has to decide which company's assets to sell off and which to keep. The most profitable companies will be kept. The least profitable companies will have their assets sold off by the bank to gain money with which to pay off the increase in the number of people withdrawing from their bank accounts. The bank, by deciding which companies to keep, or even which parts of single companies to keep, is deciding how to restructure production. This is a necessary correction. The reason there was a bank run in the first place is because the Federal Reserve pumped a bunch of money into the banks. This can be done by lowering required reserve ratios for the banks, lowering the discount rates, or buying bonds. If you want to understand how this stuff works, you should probably go look into it. At any rate, actions by the Fed can increase the money supply that banks have to lend. When this happens, the bank makes a bunch of loans they wouldn't have otherwise made, resulting in companies starting up that otherwise wouldn't have started up. Sounds great, right? Here's the problem. That extra money pumped into the banks doesn't represent actual deferred consumption or savings. Savings is when someone produces something but then doesn't consume anything. This is represented by saving money, which tells the bank that there is more stuff to invest with because someone chose to produce something without consuming, and they loaned this deferred consumption in the form of monetary notes to the bank by opening a savings account. The bank can then use this money to make loans to other companies which buy up this deferred consumption to start their own business, like a trucking company, for example. But when the Fed just pumps money into the banks, there is no deferred consumption. So the bank has all this paper, but there aren't actual additional resources in the economy. The bank then loans this paper out, starting up companies, and you get a boom. Oh man, is it great. Everyone, their mom and their dog is starting a website or buying a condo. Not right away, but eventually it becomes revealed that there isn't that much capital in the economy. And as resources get bought at faster and faster rate because of the money pumped into the banks, those owning capital start to see their stocks diminish and they raise their prices. This is inflation. As the price of capital goes up, companies can no longer afford to operate because they were founded on the assumption that the cost of capital wouldn't go up as much as it did, and so these companies collapse. The truth is, these companies never should have been started in the first place because there weren't enough resources, capital, in the economy to sustain them. The companies go bankrupt, and the inflation causes people to take their money out of the banks before it depreciates further, which forces the banks to call in loans, which causes even more companies to go bankrupt. This is the hangover from an artificial high. The bank is then forced to shut companies down, which need to be shut down. Barack Obama has allocated somewhere around $12.8 trillion for bailouts of various banks and failed firms. What will be the result? Another artificial boom followed by inflation in the capital markets, followed by companies collapsing, followed by more inflation. The only way to break this cycle is to stop taking drugs, stop pumping money. You can't do this forever. If the U.S. keeps doing this, the result will be Weimar Republic-style hyperinflation. In 1929, the situation in the U.S. wasn't that bad. It wasn't until 1931 that things really went to hell. Why? Simple. FDR primed the pump in 1929. State spending increased the money supply, mutating the structure of production, which led to an artificial boom, which was misinterpreted as recovery, followed by another crash in 1931, the Great Depression, from which recovery didn't begin until the price controls were removed in 1935 after the Supreme Court said that the NRA was unconstitutional, whatever that means. Not bailing out these companies will not result in these companies exploding. There will be jobs lost, which is unfortunate, but this frees up resources for the productive jobs. And if the Fed doesn't pump more money into the economy, these new jobs will be productive and stable.